I mentioned the cognitive functioning, the academic achievements, the behavioral functioning, social emotional functioning, and all of that. So we're checking the child's learning, we're checking the child's behavior, we're checking the child's social emotional functioning as well. So it's a whole lot of tools that we use when assess children, and then we use a battery of tests. It's not just one particular test. Alright, so I have then what type of tools are administered during psychoeducational assessment. On my slide there is a table, there's a picture that also shows another tool. Now that tool there is an academic achievement test tool. It's called the wide range achievement test. So I have listed there that we have memory and learning tests, such as the wide range assessment of memory and learning. We also have cognitive functioning tests and the IQ tests, such as the Wechsler. Very sure we heard about Wechsler. Some of us here, we have the Wechsler intelligence scale for children. We have the Kaufman brief intelligence tests. We also have academic achievement tests like the wide range test of academic achievement. The wide range achievement test, that's the RAT. We have the Kaufman test of educational achievement. And there are different types actually. Moving on, we have the handwriting test. The picture there shows the detailed assessment of speed of handwriting, that is DASH. So this particular test assesses a child's handwriting speed. Alright? If you are educators here, and I believe that most of us here are educators, some of us are parents, you might have experienced or encountered a child that is unable to complete tests or exams within the time that has been allocated for that test or exam. You may have some students that if only you gave them extra time, they would have performed better. But because the test said 1 hour or 30 minutes, in 30 minutes they are not even scratched the surface. Do you know that that is actually supposed to give evidence for the child to receive a particular type of accommodation that we'll talk about later. Alright, so Nigerian schools, we have a lot to do when it comes to that. So moving on as well, we have tests for behavioral and social emotional functioning. So we have Connors tests, that test for adaptive behavior, different tests actually showing maybe ADHD, showing attention issues, showing assessing impulsivity and the likes. Now, when it comes to the behavioral rating skills, behavior tests, a lot of times we rely on feedback from parents and teachers, and then the caregivers that work with the students. Alright, so the data gathering process for a psychoeducational assessment. For the assessments we do in school, we know that your students come to school and then they sit for a test after some time, right? Or they sit for exams after some time has passed, right? Now, for psychoeducational assessments, we're not assessing students based on what it is we have taught them over some time. Most of the tests are tests of ability, tests of performance, and things like that. So when we are gathering data for psychoeducational assessments, we start with a clinical interview with the parents. Alright, because when as psychologists, when we meet students or individuals of any age at all, we want to first of all get background information. We want to know, why was this child referred for a psychoeducational assessment? Is it because of the school? Did the school find something and then they said, oh, we need to know what we're dealing with here? Is it for some suspicions and you just want to know or want to rule out? Okay, so we take background information because we want to know where this child is coming from. We want to know pregnancy history, early childhood, developmental milestones. Okay, what about the interventions that the child has received growing up? Do you understand? And then we want to have an idea of the child's performance in school as well. So the clinical interview is very important. And if the students are older, we also have clinical interviews with the students because we need to hear the child's perspective. You know, a lot of times when students are flagged that they're not doing well, if you speak to that child, you would find out that the child is actually trying his or her best, but there are just some other things that are interfering. So that gives us some information. As part of the data gathering process as well, we have the scoring and analysis. So after the child comes, we've done clinical interview, and then the child or adult, whatever the case may be, spends the day with us or spends that appointment time with us, and we get a lot of information based on the battery of tests that I already mentioned before. So different tests are administered. Of course, the child will get breaks in between, and then we move at the child's pace so that the child is not rushed. So after all of that has been done, the psychologist will now sit and score the data. We start to score and then we move on to analysis. From analysis, we move on to report writing. And I must let you know that the psychoeducational assessment reports are usually very heavy. They are very comprehensive. And then the report shows the findings of the assessment. And then there are always recommendations to the school, to the parents as well. And then so we moved on to, I already talked about report writing. And then report discussion is a very important part as well. Because after we started with interviewing the parents, and then we started administering the test, and then we scored, we analyzed, we created the report. The next thing to do is to now sit with the parents again and then try to discuss the findings of the assessment. Okay, this is what we found. Your child's IQ in particular is this score is below the child's age expected level or is above. The child's academic achievement is at this level in numeracy, in literacy, in math skills, in comprehension. So to me, I like to look at psychoeducational assessments like a dissection because it literally breaks down every aspect of the child's functioning. Alright, so after the report discussion, I'm going to move on. My question here says, why should a student undergo a psychoeducational assessment? So, this is like asking why are students being referred for psychoeducational assessment? It could be different reasons. It could be to determine the student's current functioning. I mentioned that before. You just want to know. And I must say this now, that psychoeducational assessment is not only for students that are struggling. Sometimes for students that are even excelling, you want to check giftedness. You want to just have an idea of how the child, because if a child is in a class and the child is actually performing above that class, but you are still giving the child tasks that are below his own ability, the child will get bored. And that's when you start seeing the child exhibiting behavior issues. Why? Because you are not challenging that child. So you may want to know if this child is gifted. Maybe it's time to move quickly through the curriculum and try to advance the child's learning. And it could be because there is a special needs case exactly. It could be dyslexia. A psychoeducational assessment will help to find that out, to help diagnose whether the child has dyslexia, if there are reading issues, if there are writing issues, if there are handwriting difficulties. It can help to show that. Remember, I said it is like a dissection. When you dissect something, you see the parts, the strengths, weaknesses, and all of that. Also, to determine the strengths and weaknesses. This lady said it the other time. When you do an assessment, you can tell the strengths and the weaknesses. So, a psychoeducational assessment, because it's a dissection, you can tell the child's strengths and the child's weaknesses. Also, to confirm or to rule out possible concerns with the students' learning or other aspects of functioning. Now, this is very important. Anytime we are having a clinical interview with parents, they would say, "Oh, Mrs. Ogunnaike, I have been suspecting this, but I'm not sure. I just want this assessment to tell me if my suspicions are true or we're going to rule it out." There are some parents that will say, "I don't think this is the case. This runs in my family. This does not run in my family. I think this." But then we'll tell them, you know what? The assessment is objective. There is no bias. It will show exactly what the child is presenting with. Also, to determine eligibility for support during internal and external examinations. Now, I used an example of handwriting skills. Sometimes, some students require support, and this support is called accommodation or access arrangement. If a child has difficulty with reading, the child is unable to pronounce some words, or is still struggling with blending, and then you give the child the exams that the child requires to read, the child is supposed to read and understand, there is no way the child is going to perform well. Do you understand? And then by the time the report comes out, they will say the child is an olodo. Is the child an olodo? No. It's just because the child was not supported. Try giving that child an oral test or another testing format. You will be surprised that, oh, this child will actually perform better. So a psychoeducational assessment will tell you exactly that this child there's something about the child's literacy skills, there's something about the child's reading, there's something about the child's comprehension. So now, thinking about comprehension, if the child has poor comprehension and the child is supposed to read and comprehend and answer, how is the child going to answer when comprehension is an issue? So when a child undergoes a psychoeducational assessment and we find that comprehension is an issue, there is low comprehension, a type of external, internal accommodation or access arrangement we recommend is called modified carrier language. It means that we can modify the language of testing. Let me give an example. If a question says, oh, the boy was elated, a child with comprehension issue might not understand what that is. But if we modify the question and say the child was excited, immediately he picks. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to support students so that they are not at a disadvantage because of the difficulties that they have. Some people actually argue that access arrangement is making the children lazy. Excuse me, it's not making any child lazy. We're supporting them so that they will not, their difficulty will not hamper their success. That's the whole idea. So the importance of psychoeducational assessment is to provide documented and standardized evidence of a child's functioning. And I keep saying child, but a psychoeducational assessment actually can be conducted on individuals with a very wide range of age, like 5 to 90 years. So as adults here, we can actually conduct psychoeducational assessments on you. And if you're ready for that, please see me after this presentation. All right, so for intervention planning as well, I already talked I've not talked about intervention planning. Now, intervention planning is a very key component of psychoeducational assessment. Some schools have learning support departments. They understand that some students are not able to access the mainstream curriculum. They are not able to move at the mainstream class pace. So they require additional support. Now, for you to plan the intervention for the students, you need that child to undergo a psychoeducational assessment because the report that comes out of it is a legal document. And once the school gets it, they will need to follow the intervention. They will need to, some schools will say, okay, if the recommendation from psychoeducational assessment is saying this child needs one-on-one intervention. If you're saying this child needs a smaller classroom, if you're saying this child needs extra or remedial classes on particular subjects, if you're saying this child needs speech therapy, if you're saying this child needs ABA therapy, if you're saying this child needs educational therapy or occupational therapy, whatever it is that the child needs, the psychoeducational assessment will draw up an intervention plan for the child. So if you're school owners here or teachers, this is a tool to help you, okay, so that you're not struggling trying to fit a child into a box. All right? So I'm going to move on to the importance of psychoeducational assessment. Still, for access arrangement, I talked about access arrangement a while ago. I gave some examples. I said extra time. Some students require extra time, but they need to do a psychoeducational assessment. And the psychoeducational assessment will determine and indicate it there that the child needs 25% extra time, 50% or 100% extra time. There are different access arrangements. So there is the scribe as well. Some students have physical reasons why they cannot write, or physical impairments, or it could be an intellectual impairment to their writing as well. So once that is indicated, we're going to recommend that the child should have a scribe. A scribe is another individual that is scribing while the child is saying the answers to the exams orally. Okay, another access arrangement could also be prompting or a prompter. If a child has attention issues or concentration issues or distractibility issues, how is that child going to sit in the classroom with every other person and write exams? The child will be distracted. So a prompter will be prompting. John, number one, John, move on to number two. John, are you done? So if a child needs a prompter, it will be indicated in the assessment report. If a child needs separate invigilation, some students cannot do tests and exams in the same room with every other person. They will need to sit one-on-one with the teacher. If the child needs supervised rest breaks because the child easily gets tired, it will be written in the psychoeducational assessments that when the child is doing tests or exams, give the child a bit of a break or supervise and then let the child come back. All of these things are stated in a psychoeducational assessment. So the school has to honor it and provide it. During external exams like the checkpoint and the NGCSE, they always will honor it. Alright, so adapting psychoeducational assessment to Nigerian setting. Now this is very personal to me because I've been in this field of conducting psychoeducational assessments for over 10 years now, and I'm very proud, to say that. But I realized that a lot of times our Nigerian setting, using these tools, because most of the tools are important, using it to assess our Nigerian students, there's always this issue of language or the context. Alright? So when I was obtaining my Chartered Educational Assessor status, I did a research, I did a case study on adaptation of, so I used a particular tool, adaptation of the wide range assessment of memory and learning into the Nigerian setting. Do you know why I did this? So they were, in that test has different stories or verbal learning words or things like that. But there were some words, particularly the language, that was not, it just did not fit into the Nigerian setting because of our environment. For example, if we're talking about cherries, how many of us even have seen cherries or saw cherries before we got to this age? And Agbalumo is not cherry, by the way. Agbalumo is not cherry, by the way. Do you understand? So if a story is talking about cherries, talking about skating rink and things like that, as a psychologist, I know that the fact that the familiarity of that word is very low. A Nigerian child is not even familiar with that word. And then when it's time for me to test the child and I'm asking, what did I say? The child can't even remember cherries or skating rink. Then I'll mark that child as the child having poor memory. No, there's something wrong. Because I've been involved in research, I could query that and say, no, we need to adapt these tests and try to maybe use words that are more familiar. Amusement park, banana, tangerine and things like that, so that we are not putting our own, our fellow Nigerian students at a disadvantage. So really it's about adapting, this test to the Nigerian environment. Okay, so the findings from that research that I did, so I worked with my team and then we decided to administer the original test in the first term, and then we did some adaptations, and then we administered the adapted test in the second term. And then we found out that at the end of the day, the students that took the second term test performed better. Why? Because of the familiarity of the language and the setting. So we could see that clearly people need to be familiar with the language of tests. Do you understand? And then we could also conclude that we have students that are, some of them are Nigerians, but they were not born here. The environment that they were exposed to is different. So they understand that international test. So we have to keep the two versions of the test. When we have international students, we administer the original. And then we have typical Nigerian students. We administer the other one. It was very, very interesting. Alright, so I'm going to share my vision for psychoeducational assessment in Nigeria. That vision is that I'm hoping that we can adapt or standardize all psychoeducational assessment tools to fit the Nigerian context. Interpretation of the English tests to Nigerian local languages. Imagine when we can do psychoeducational assessments in Yoruba, in Igbo, in Hausa. You know that there are people in the rural areas that have these issues. They have special needs cases where they are just relegated. How do you assess them? You bring them to your office, they don't even understand the English you're speaking. Do you understand? So I'm hoping that people here will join me on that mission to interpret, to standardize, and even maybe adapt and even create unique psychoeducational assessment tools. Yes, in Nigerian, with Nigerian or in Nigerian languages. Okay, so I already promised you that I wasn't going to be long. I think I kept my promise. Please clap for me. All right, so it's time for questions. I've said a lot, and I said I don't want to be more talking. But this is your answer. So, so I'll come back to you.
Thank you very much. So I have two questions. The first one is that the questions you'll be asking the parent, are they stipulated questions or it's based on the person that is just asking?
No, I don't think I got that question.
When you are doing an interview for the parents of the child, so are they stipulated questions you can ask them or you can go outside the box? Then the second one is, so that means you said it's standardized test. I thought you were supposed to one fixed test, but the way you said you should be able to manipulate it to a Nigerian test, is that allowed?
Yes. I hope I will remember the question. So the first one is, from what I got, you are asking if the clinical interview is structured interview or interview that's more like open-ended. So what we try to do is to ask, we let the answers lead to questions. Just put it that way. So it's open-ended. We also have structured interviews as well. So there are structured questions in some tests that we can ask. But basically, remember, we're trying to get information about background information. So we are going back and asking, what was pregnancy like? What was, vaccinations, growing up, development in school. So it's kind of open-ended. So it can be either open-ended or closed-ended. Then you were asking about the adaptation of the test, if it's allowed, since it's standardized. So the whole idea was, of course, we took permission to do that, and because it's in a setting that is not familiar, I had to speak with my research people and say, okay, this is what I want to do. And they said, no problem, go ahead, and let's just pilot it and see what that looks like. Yes. Can we hear?
Hello.
Can you hear
If a parent is living denial and they don't want to do that psychological questions and all those analysis and everything, and they keep living denial, they don't want to do that, they just want the child to be somewhere. And like, what advice would you give the parents?
Thank you for the question. That's a very solid question. If you didn't hear her, I'm just going to project what she asked. She said, what if a parent is in denial and the parent does not want to do the psychoeducational assessment? The parent is just, just insisting that they don't want to do the psychoeducational assessment. I would say encourage the parents. Because I would say let the parents see a psychologist, because a lot of times, is this country, once they hear psychologists like this, they are just, no, it's not like this. They should come and see me. Please get my card, let them speak to me. When we speak to parents, they now understand that, I need to do this assessment. It's not a sentence. It's for you to even know what is going on with your child. It is a tool. Imagine you are sick, but you don't even know which part of your body. You don't know, because you've not done a medical test. So you don't even know whether it's headache, whether it's leg pain, and you are just lost. Do you understand? So I would say, please advise such a parent to speak with a psychologist, not even to do the assessment, but to just speak with a psychologist to encourage the parents. Do you understand? I hope that answers your question. Okay, I have another.
Right, so I have a question, but before that, let me just mention that one thing that can help we get the issue with denial is the parent is saying that there is nothing wrong with my child. So it's how you communicate with the parents that count. So if you are saying, something wrong with your child, well, let's find out why. Then, because that parent that is in denial will say, I'll try it, nothing wrong with my child. However, once if you say, we see we are experiencing this kind of difficulty, this one, and this is what we have done about it. We want to get certain answers so that we can do better. And for us to do that better, these are certain tests. And then you don't make it sound like it's for special needs, because it's not for special needs, right? So it's for all children. Yeah. So my question, that would be my question, how easy is it to access this education, because now we're, first of all, we're in Lagos. So I want to look at it from how is it easy to access it in Lagos? Because if it's only, let's say it's only you, and there are like hundreds of thousands of children, I'm sure you can't sell for them. So how is it to access that in Lagos and of course across Nigeria?
Thank you very much for, first of all, your contribution. I want to also add, just before I answer a question, is that when we're speaking to parents about psychoeducational assessment, the parent pays for the assessment. So the assessment report, we are not ethically, the ethics of our profession, we cannot release that report to the school if the parents don't give their written consent. Do you understand? So we tell them, okay, do this psychoeducational assessment, right? Let's even know your child's current function. It's not to box the child, because even the students sometimes they ask us that, oh my God, if I do this assessment, does that mean I will be labeled? Does that mean I will not be able to move like other? So they have so many concerns. We're like, you know what, just do it first of all. By the time we're done with the assessment and we discuss it with the parents, then the next question is, do you want us to share this with your child's school? Some parents will say no. Some parents will say, you know what, this is because it's a very confidential report. Some parents will say, share only the recommendation part, and it is binding on us to do that. Do you understand? So this matter of denial is a whole different topic. Do you understand? For another, most times the denial is more on the difficulties that the child has, and then they are worried that if I do this assessment, it's going to show. Do you understand? So please, I would say, let a psychologist speak with the person. So your question about how to access this service, like for example in Lagos. So I work with Anthos House, and then Anthos House has a psychology department that conducts psychoeducational assessment. I head that department. I have my colleagues here. If you might have noticed, I have Miss Ifeoluwa, I have Miss Elizabeth. Then there's another person, Mr. Wali. So we're a team of 4 professionals that conduct psychoeducational assessments. There are some other centers that also conduct psychoeducational assessments, but I can vouch for our own psychoeducational assessments. Do you understand? So if you want to access psychoeducational assessments, please come to us. All right? We can always, yes. Oh, is it the tools or the assessment?
No.
It's the assessment.
It's
the assessment she's asking about.
How easy is it to access them? And I don't mean you, but I mean professionals in your field.
So in this, yes, I think I've answered it, but there are some people actually in Lagos that conduct psychoeducational assessments, and Anthos House is a place like that. Okay, so I'm trying to take it out. Okay, the referee. You said your hand was
Yes,
don't. I'm coming to you next. Okay.
So I want to know, for those tools that you talked about, can you able can a parent order it from abroad, or can you get an answer for it?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. I'll come to you next. So can the parent order it? So it's not for parents, it's for the professional. And we don't sell the instruments. We get the instruments from Pearson Clinical. Pearson Clinical UK. Do you understand? And so we order from them, and then they send to us, and then we are registered. So other centers in Nigeria that conduct psychoeducational assessments, at least I know of one place that gets their tools as well from Pearson Clinical. But the main thing about psychoeducational assessments is that it must be standardized tools that are reported. Because some people say that this psychoeducational assessment will just do 2 + 2, 5 + 3. No. The main idea of being standardized is because it's been checked against the norms of particular standardized samples, and you know what is expected of a particular age group. Do you understand? Alright, so I'm coming to you, madam.
So I have a few questions. So one of it is, what background knowledge do you need to be certified? Another one is, what kind of clinics do this kind of assessments? Are there hospitals? Are there special clinics? And then does it require plotting of graphs and interpretation? Is it easy to use by teachers so that when you make your recommendations, teachers can easily use it on the child or whoever that is concerned. And the last one is it a once and for all assessment or a periodic one?
Thank you for those 4 questions. I'll try to remember as many as I can. I'm going to start from the last one. Yes, you remind me. Is it a one-off or periodic? So according to the British Council, a psychoeducational assessment is valid for 3 years. So the validity period is 3 years. After 3 years, another one must be done. So if you take a psychoeducational assessment report that is already expired to the British Council or for checkpoint or IGCs, whatever recommendations or access agreement, it will not be granted because the assessment is expired. So because we are a part of Green Spring School, when our students are nearing year 6, year 9, year 11, they reach out to the psychology department to renew students' assessment. So we service not just Green Spring School, we service schools outside Lagos, outside Nigeria as well. So your next question, which of them can it be used by teachers?
So the recommendation.
Okay, so they just told me that we are running out of time. But let me just answer this question.
Recommendation.
The recommendations, can it be used by teachers?
How do we interpret it as teachers?
Okay, thank you. So we try to make sure that the recommendations are simple, plain. The recommendation is very direct. Classroom strategies. Do this and this with this child. Break down instructions. Use concrete learning. Something like that. Use multisensory whatever. If it's a child with dyslexia, do this and this and this. So you don't need to plot any graph. It's in plain English and it's really direct. The other question, I don't want to be disobedient to my host. So
clinics? What clinics?
Where can the
Clinics that
assessments done,
yes,
right?
is it hospitals? Is it private centers?
Well, I would say hospitals, except if it's a hospital that focuses on, like the Federal Neuropsychiatric Hospital, for example. They don't do psychoeducational assessments per se. They may do psychological assessments, MMPIs, and all of that. So you need to go to places that is stated that they do. So I would say psychology clinics, or a school like, especially a school like Anchor's House that provides this service.
And the last one, what background knowledge do you need?
So the background knowledge you need is
To be certified.
to be certified as what?
The
A psychoeducational assessor. So there are various, to be chartered. So you need to contact the Chartered Institute of Educational Assessors in the UK, University of Bedfordshire, CIA. So they have different programs and it. So you just keep attaining different levels until you get to the chartered level. Now, what background knowledge you need? You need background knowledge in psychology, educational psychology, clinical psychology, school psychology. I'm just listing them. At least a master's degree. Okay, so they said, I don't want to use the language you guys say. They said your time is up. I don't want to use it on myself. But I think we need to round up. But you can see me after this, so we keep talking. Is this not cheating? There was somebody else, right?
Okay, I was just going to ask for you be talking about educational psychology. Okay, my name is Esther. I just want to speak for the children. I don't like to use the word less privilege, but that's what I will use. Because my own son is autistic, and that's what brought me to this. And because of that, I've gone to meet parents, maybe on the street, or I told them, okay, maybe have something like this. They can't afford to put their children in special schools. Are we saying all this assessment, schooling, and education that are they cut off? Okay, we have some now. We have to open a center, a special class in church for them because parents are leaving their children at home and they'll come to church. So when they come to, we can't keep doing this. The church cannot deny this. So we open the center for them. And they ask questions like, okay, church now, one came, this 15 years old, the first time that child is coming up. So what will happen to parents that have children like this? Those of you that are in this field, what are we going to do for them? Because I have access to education, I can afford to put my child. There are so many out there, so many out there that cannot afford this. We forget about them. What can we do?
Very thought-provoking question. Trust me, I've asked that question as well. And for us at Anchor House, we are also working on getting scholarships. So that, because we've actually interviewed quite a number of people that just cannot afford it. And the true question is it only those that have money that can access special needs services? Do you understand? So I think we also need to reach out to the government as well. We need to be able to, and yes, thank you, NGOs and foundations. We need to be able to have secondary education assessments free and then special needs interventions, or at least a subsidized rate. Just a minute.
About the assessment for parents as regards their children, what if their parents maybe suffer from long-time memory loss and couldn't recall what happened when being childhood with these things and was eager to assess the child, try to do something for this child. So what in that situation, what do you think can be done as a substitute?
Thank you very much for that question. So our question is, if during clinical interview we find that the parents have long-term memory loss and they cannot remember the child's, so I would say that's not a problem per se. It just means that we will not have sufficient information for the background information. Our main focus is our own administration of tests to see the child's current functioning. If we cannot have so much information, because I can easily say, oh, we'll ask the other family members, there might be no need for that. Our focus is our own, because when we administer this test, it tells us exactly how the child is functioning, regardless of what has happened before. The reason why we're asking for background information is to just have an idea of the history of the child, so we can just move forward with that. I hope that answers your question. Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
so before the other man comes and tells me.
Okay, mine is just to ask, do we have access to the slides? Can we get the slides? And that goes to the previous presentation as well. To who?
To the organizers. So I think.
Okay, so Mr. Benga has my slides, so you can. Yes. One more person. So this is final question.
So much. I came in when you were wrapping up, but I think I really enjoyed the class. My question is, when the other woman was asking how to reach out to people, because the whole essence is meeting and reaching out, to children that has this problem. And I think that yes, instead of going to that college, the actual school should be looking at, training teachers. Maybe 12 weeks, 3 months program that will help teachers. In that way, you'll be able to propagate and you'll be able to spread more.
Thank you for your suggestion. Actually, we were thinking about it because Green Springs School has a Green Springs Training College, and we're trying to ensure that Anchor House also has special needs. But I will take your suggestion. I'll take it back to the school and speak to the authorities and say there was a suggestion of what it is that we can do. So thank you so much. Thank you for being a fantastic audience.